But before all of that, let's start with calls from the Children's Commissioner for all police forces in England and Wales to reveal how many children have been strip searched. Dame Rachel de Souza made her appeal as she published data showing that Metropolitan Police officers conducted intrusive searches on 650 young people aged 10 to 17, and that was between 2018 and 2020. Dame Rachel commissioned her report after the case of child Q, a 15-year-old black girl who was strip-searched at her East London school without an appropriate adult present. Her teachers had wrongly suspected her of carrying cannabis, and they called the police. And of these 650 children who were searched, 19 in every 20 were boys, and 58, that's nearly two-thirds, were described by the officer as being black. So what are we to conclude from all this? Let's talk to Nanette Youssef, a policy editor at the Runnymede Trust. Nanette, hello.
Hi, Henry.
Hi.
Good to be here.
Good to talk to you. And Paul Britton, a leading criminal defence lawyer and founder of Britain and Time. Paul, hello.
Good evening, Henry.
Hi. I'm going to start off with you, Paul. What was your immediate reaction when you heard these figures? Not your reaction now, but this morning.
Well, it really depends on the age group of these children. I think the data that we're looking at is between 10 and 17-year-olds. And if the police are conducting them outside of the guidance that they've been set, then it's clearly outrageous. There are, in the hierarchy of searches, there are the standard stop and search, which we all know. And under those circumstances, what you find is the police might ask you to remove your jacket or an item of footwear or something like that. But if it goes a little bit further, then we're in the realms of a strip search. What can they do? Well, they can take off, or they can ask you to take off more than just your jacket or your gloves and start exposing parts of your body. Now, if it is the intimate searches, well, then this is slightly more serious. And what the police are doing is they are going into body orifices like the mouth and trying to find either drugs or weapons that you might hurt yourself with. And the situation, the circumstances in each of the cases, I'm sure varies. And I think it would be interesting if we could see more behind what is actually happening.
Mm-hmm. The police say that they have ensured their officers and staff have a refreshed understanding of the policy for conducting a further search, particularly around the requirement for an appropriate adult to be present. What do you understand by refreshed understanding? Do you think that actually means some of our officers didn't have a clue?
Well, that's not clear enough, is it? I mean, I think the police are duty bound to go further than just a vague statement like a refreshment. You know, what training have they had? Is it adequate? And I think MPs in particular will want to know the answer to these questions when they look more closely at what the police are actually doing.
You say MPs will be interested. How interested do you think they will be, particularly in government?
Well,
because
it's a bit of a fiasco.
Well, indeed, but the trend, and I'm sure Nanette, when we come to you, you'll probably agree with this. The trend has been to empower the police and to make them feel that they don't have to be woke, they don't have to nanny around, and they need to basically focus on the priorities of the people, as they're described, and just get in there and arrest people.
Well, that isn't that the salient point, Henry? Understanding what the priorities of the people are. Are we in a situation now where the people of this country believe that it's okay to conduct intimate searches into body orifices for drugs or weapons of children between the age of 10 and 17? I think that is a question that we quite quickly need to address.
But I've heard some retired police officers saying today, and I've not heard any current police officer on the record, that children are vulnerable. Whenever a child is stabbed, there's a huge amount of concern, huge pressure on the police. You see and hear the anguish of the parents. And it's only by doing these searches in extremis that the police will be able to do their jobs, protect children, sometimes from themselves.
Well, I mean, the data that we're looking at the moment is children that are in custody that have been arrested. Mm-hmm. Child Q doesn't actually form part of that data because they were never actually arrested. So what are the true figures? Because it's all very choice of the police saying, oh, well, let's look at the data only of children that are under arrest or being detained. But I think the problem, this is just scratching the tip of the iceberg. What are the actual numbers? And as you said, what is this training that the police are having?
Yeah. Paul, thank you very much. Let's talk to Nanette Youssef, policy editor at the think tank, the Runnymede Trust. Nanette, what about the cultural and ethnic dimension to all this? Black boys being grossly overrepresented in this group of 650 children.
Like you said, Henry, 58% of the 650 children that were stop searched were black. That rose to 75% of children being black in 2018 that were stopped and searched. These are disproportionately high numbers of black children undergoing this incredibly traumatic and harmful exercise, which is not being effective at all. Over 50% of these strip searches resulted in no further action. So there's this appalling attitude that's pervading the police force that's demonstrating that they believe that these strip searches, disproportionately borne by black children, are worthwhile, when we can see from the figures that they're not.
What do you think's going on in the minds of the police officers on the street, the ones at the custody suite, and indeed their bosses? The bosses who come on the radio, come on the TV and constantly talk about how diverse they are, how they've learned so much since Stephen Lawrence, and how they want to serve the public. They're not a force, they're a service.
To me, this is just clear evidence, once again, of systematic racism within the Met Police Force and a systematic problem of child protection within the Met. Let's be really clear, this is almost as close as we can get to state-sanctioned child abuse. It's a deeply appalling set of figures. And I think it's also indicative of a government failure to press the Met to have true accountability and urgently review their guidance on not just strip searches, but a lot of other forms of disproportionate policing, including measures like stop and search, which are disproportionately borne out against marginalised communities that are over-policed but underprotected.
When you say underprotected, I hear police officers, whenever stop and search comes up, saying, well, what do you want us to do? You want us to protect these children. You want us to enable them to walk out the street and know that their peers are not carrying weapons. And at the same time, you tell us not to stop and search them. So what are we to do? That's what police officers probably listening to this now will say.
I think that's a really good question. But what police officers could do is follow their own laws and their own guidance when it comes to stop and search. At the moment, these statistics have shown that 23% of the cases when the strip search was conducted had no appropriate adult present. In the very few cases where a strip search is warranted, the police could at the very minimum be following their own rules with regards to it.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much indeed, Nanette Youssef, policy editor at the think tank, the Runnymede Trust, and Paul Britton, leading criminal defence lawyer. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Times Radio. It's 7:15.
Matt Chorley, tomorrow morning from 10 on Times Radio.
It turns out plastic isn't fantastic. We're using less than a